This video is sponsored by Squarespace. It's Halloween, my dudes, and I wanted to do a spooky, scary video. Originally, that meant I was going to take a look at Cursed City and the haunting journey it has been on, which would have been a really interesting video, admittedly. Cursed City was a board game from Games Workshop that was launched to much fanfare. It was hotly anticipated, to say the least. And then it did release, immediately sold out, and then disappeared, never to be seen again, blackbagged by Games Workshop and taken to their equivalent of Guantanamo Bay, probably somewhere like Papelwick or something. Then we followed a year of silence from Games Workshop, only to get a re-released version of Cursed City and an expansion too, which was pretty random. Yes, the communication from Games Workshop sucked. Yes, Cursed City was on my list of the 5 biggest screw-ups from Games Workshop in 2021. And yes, Cursed City was absolutely bungled in terms of release. Haha, look at the silly board game. Because yes, that's what the video was going to be. Oh, look at the expansions for Cursed City the Games Workshop released. Everybody hates them. Except, I realized I really like the Cursed City expansions. In fact, I think that the Cursed City expansions are some of the best products Games Workshop have ever made. Boom, mother liquor! Every other influencer is like, oh, what the hell is up with these things? Not me. I'm like, hell yeah, this is great. Everyone's wrong about these expansions. And look, I'm not talking about the gameplay of these expansions or what they really add to the game of Cursed City. I don't care about the gameplay. I've never played Cursed City. But the gameplay doesn't really matter because 1, it's a Games Workshop product, and 2, no one is attacking the Cursed City expansions on the basis of poor gameplay. That's not the problem that most people and influencers have. Most reviewers of the original box game Cursed City said that the gameplay wasn't very good, and that was where the majority of criticism lay. In contrast, the vast majority of criticism of the Cursed City expansions have been around the lack of miniatures contained inside the box. Yes, Cursed City expansions are Games Workshop's first tabletop game that don't come with miniatures. And I like it! There are 2 big expansions for Cursed City that I'm aware of. The first is Night Wars, which is about a trio of vampires that take over the city and you have to fight them. And then there's a new expansion called Nemesis that is coming out. This was just recently announced, and it's about this fella called Radiker taking over the Cursed City and fighting the players. I'm seeing a recurring theme here, and both expansions follow the same style. They come with a bunch of rules, a bunch of cardboard, a few data sheets, a bunch of tokens, and that's it. No minis, baby. No plastic here at all. And that's not to say that the expansions don't add new characters to the game. There are, and that's also not to say that there aren't new miniatures that exist that represents the monsters statted out in these boxes. There are. Models for them exist. Games Workshop sell them. They just haven't put them in this box. They are sold separately on the Games Workshop website, and people are losing their minds. They lost it with Night Wars when they discovered they would have to pay £126 to get all of the miniatures for this expansion. And it's not a lot of miniatures. It's like 7 miniatures. In contrast, Cursed City was £120 for the entire board game, including 60 miniatures. And now, people are losing their minds all over again because of Nemesis, and the likely certainty that picking up the miniatures separately for this expansion will not be any cheaper. But this is good, and I'll explain why after telling you how to disagree with me on this topic extremely publicly and loudly, because why not make your own website dedicated explicitly to why I'm wrong? And if you do want to do such a thing, then I'd recommend Squarespace. That's what I use to build my own website, not dedicated to explaining why I'm wrong, but to be my mood board for my own secret spooky project. Squarespace comes with a bunch of awesome templates that lets anybody build a comprehensive and beautiful website without any of the skills required. Seriously. Take it from me. If you want to show off your miniatures or create your own miniature wargame, Squarespace is an invaluable tool that will allow you to do so and create for you your own online presence. You do not need to be tech savvy at all. Squarespace even provides the tools for setting up an online store. So if you are thinking of selling miniature painting or art or even a game, I'd recommend building your own space instead of getting lost in the crowd. You can even connect it to your social media accounts, allowing you to push website content to your favorite social media channels, creating an all-in-one hub to manage your projects and let your followers know what's going on. It's really cool. So go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/discoursminiatures to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And there's a link to that URL in the description of this video. Thanks Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Okay, so why are the Cursed City expansions the best products the Games Workshop have ever created? Well, a quick caveat. So the expansions are pretty expensive, even without miniatures in the boxes. Night Wars was priced at £30 or $50, which, let's be honest, it probably could have been about half that price. But honestly, it's not that bad in the board game market. £30 is about right for a fully feature-complete board game expansion. I wouldn't really expect 7 beautiful miniatures in a board game expansion for that price from Games Workshop. In fact, keeping the miniatures out of the Night Wars box has meant that Games Workshop have lowered the price as a result. If you had this expansion pack with the miniatures, we'd be looking at around 120 quid or more for that imaginary box. And these expansion packs are breaking new ground because the idea of selling the rules for a game or expansion separate from the miniatures is a good one in theory, because it means that if all you care about are the minis inside, then you don't have to buy a bunch of rules for a game you're not gonna play. And it takes up space on your shelf and it gets in the way of things and it's just a big box of something. I have too many boxes like that. This way, you can get the miniatures that you want separate. In contrast, if you just want to play the expansion for the gameplay, bear with me here, it's a Games Workshop game, I get it, but bear with me, you can pick up the expansion gameplay components and play with those, and you don't have to pay an inflated price because a bunch of overpriced models are included in the box. This is actually a problem I have with a lot of board games these days. They include so many pointless miniatures that just serve to push the price point higher. Instead, just let me use the tokens inside the expansion box to represent the new characters and monsters. It's a really clever compromise, one that is deserving of praise. Finally, something I can praise about Games Workshop, making the price point lower on their games. Because presumably, Games Workshop have included tokens in these expansions to represent the missing miniatures. Because if they didn't, then they'd just be selling an incomplete product. It would be absolutely wild not to include tokens that represent the new monsters added in this expansion. No one has ever done that and gotten away with it. Seriously, I cannot emphasize how much that's like the bare minimum required in the board game market, and how it would be such an easy, obvious inclusion to make, and the lack of any such tokens would really make the product worthless and signal to players that the entire product line is destined to die. But luckily, Games Workshop have included said little tokens, presumably. I'm going to assume that that's the case. I don't think I really need to look into it because, of course, Of course they would. Of course they would. There's no way they would. I'll look it up later. So I think the real problem that these expansions are highlighting for hobbyists, even if those hobbyists don't realize it, is that Games Workshop are selling individual miniatures for £19. That's where the big £126 figure is coming from. It's 7 extremely overpriced miniatures. That's the actual problem here. But everyone is so inoculated to Games Workshop prices that they don't even recognize this as an issue. Instead, people are tallying up the costs of buying all the miniatures separately to discover that it would cost more to buy these 7 necessary models than it would cost to buy the actual original box of Curse City. And they're saying, oh my god, that's a ridiculous price for 7 board game miniatures. But it's only ridiculous by board game standards, a hobby that contains actual competition between different companies, meaning that it's a lot more accessible and cheaper to engage with. Miniature wargaming, in contrast, is dominated by Games Workshop, who have settled onto the idea of the wargaming hobby being a small niche, and therefore extremely expensive to engage with. So the problem isn't the Cursed City expansions, it's the core price of Games Workshop miniatures, and really the central ideology behind their business model. As an example, just the other day I was buying some Bushido miniatures, and they're like £8 to £9 sterling per resin miniature, so to me, they're pretty pricey. I was thinking, oh my god, these are so expensive, can I really justify these prices? But then I remembered, Games Workshop are selling miniatures for 3 times that amount. And that's been totally normalized. In that context, £8 to £9 sterling is kind of a steal. And those miniatures come with their rules, so you get everything you need to play them. And the best part, if I buy 6 Bushido miniatures, I'm done. I have a full warband. So yeah, I bought them. And if anyone is interested, I'm playing as the Silver Moon Trade Syndicate. I basically want to play as Echigoya from the first mission in every Tenchu game.
Come on!
That's my power fantasy.
My money! My money!
It's just that when you take the Games Workshop miniatures outside of a bundle, it's hard not to see that they're incredibly expensive. These Cursed City expansions are an act of consciousness raising from Games Workshop, really. One that I applaud. People are having to grapple with the dissonance of having a board game with extortionately expensive components, which honestly isn't usual. I think focusing on the Cursed City expansions as the problem is the mistake. We should be focusing attention on how we got to a place where 7 miniatures can cost £126, and apparently that's only news if there's a board game expansion that makes use of them. It's like how the Joker, this channel's spirit animal, says, if 7 necessary miniatures for an army in Age of Sigmar are sold for £126, nobody panics because it's all going according to plan. But if I say that one little old board game expansion will require £126 for 7 miniatures, then suddenly everybody loses their minds. Cursed City was just Games Workshop introducing a little anarchy to the equation and upsetting the status quo. It's all about context. Games Workshop have made us think about their prices in a different context. In fact, I think another issue here is just expectations. On the back of the Night Wars box, Games Workshop say that you need these miniatures to play this game, sold separately. But you don't. Like I've said, presumably, Games Workshop have included cheap cardboard proxy tokens to represent the various expansion characters, like all other board games to have existed before. Because that's the bare minimum, and Games Workshop are a premium content producer who want to make functional products. So that being the case, presumably, we should celebrate the fact the Games Workshop are giving us more choice and letting us buy our own miniatures, our own proxies for these, or simply having the option to play their games with the minimum buy-in required. As someone who owns a 3D printer, this is great. I can buy the rules and then print out some of my own minis for use in the game. Not everyone owns a 3D printer, of course, but everyone can go into North Star Gaming, find some spooky vampire miniatures, and use those. In fact, these games are encouraging people to proxy miniatures rather than buy them from Games Workshop. I'd go so far to say, in fact, that if there was a hypothetical world where Games Workshop didn't include the necessary cardboard character tokens required to make this a functional product and not just a box of trash that should have been disappeared to Popplewick, then I would positively say that people have a duty in such a world to proxy miniatures for the characters in this box rather than pay the extortionate prices the Games Workshop have set. Luckily, we don't live in that world, and you can play the game straight out of the box, like every other board game ever made. I'd love to see this attitude from Games Workshop utilized more in Kill Team, Warcry, and other game systems. Sell rules separately from the big bundles. Provide us with standees, cheaper cardboard contents, increase player choice. Make your games as accessible as possible, just like other companies do, such as One Page Rules, who sell tokens for all their armies. All I can say about these Curse City expansions is that I'd like to see them be a little bit cheaper, but you do get a totally functional experience for a pretty low price as far as Games Workshop is concerned, assuming, once again, that you get character cardboard tokens inside these boxes. This represents a great change for Games Workshop, one that I hope takes off, encouraging players to source their own miniatures, to proxy miniatures, to print their own, or to ultimately use the fun, colorful tokens that are presumably included inside the boxes, because without that, they would not be a functional product, and this expansion would have no reason to exist. Games Workshop are normalizing the use of proxies, and that's pretty cool to see. So thanks to all my patrons, especially Sonic Bread, and I'll catch y'all next time. Bye-bye! Okay, so I just discovered the Games Workshop do not include cardboard tokens to represent any of the miniatures inside of this box? What the hell were they thinking? Is there a Game of Thrones going on in the background of Games Workshop? Is that what's happening? Is Curse City like the love child of some disowned second son? And now Kevin Roundtree is trying to put this thing down once and for all? Why didn't they include tokens? Why didn't they include tokens? It would have been so easy. It would have been so easy. Why does this exist? I take it all back. This is the worst thing Games Workshop have ever made. It's not functional. It's not functional. What the hell is it?